So my name is Matthew Garratt. I'm a commercial director looking after the transportation division in Costain. Just so you know the perspective that I have on the industry, our footprint is almost entirely in infrastructure delivery, and so High Speed 2 is part of my portfolio. I wanted to do a talk about just reflecting really on what happened, how the industry responded, and some of the really positive stuff and the challenges and the developments that the industry has made as a result of the pandemic. So slide one. This is a kind of 2-year rough timeline on, the various phases of lockdowns. As Niall said, it was a really weird period, a very difficult period. And when I look back, actually, when Andrew was talking, I remembered that we signed our civils contract for High Speed 2 on 1st of April 2020, right at the start of this whole process. And through that period that is shown on this screen, we assembled, in part recruited, and put together and put to work a team of well in excess of 1,000 people in a virtual environment to deliver High Speed 2. And, it is testament to the positivity, the ingenuity, and the resilience of the industry as to how we really pushed on, and as Andrew's shown on some of the slides, what we've achieved in that period. But it was a difficult period. This slide was aiming at the legal restrictions, but just to give you an understanding, because, when you're looking at, when this is all happening, one of the things that contractors turn to is, wow, what's the relief? Is this a change in law? What is it? And, whilst there was legislation and regulations, we had the Coronavirus Act in 2020, and the Health Protection Coronavirus Restrictions Regulations 2020. Now, whilst these did impose some restrictions on movement, they stopped short of preventing people going to work. So there were some restrictions imposed by law, but they weren't really that strong. There was other sort of forms of guidance out there from government. There were policies and guidance in individual businesses, and in our clients. And of course, we each made individual choices about protecting ourselves and others and the circumstances that we were in. So it was quite a mix, really, of legal guidance and personal choices about how we operated. And in the main, construction industry pressed on. Certainly from the point of view of infrastructure delivery, there was tremendous support from central government and guidance and encouragement to, whilst being safe, continue to press on. And what did I see with my very own eyes? Well, whilst there was this global coronavirus pandemic going on, there was another outbreak happening, specifically in UK construction, that I saw. Everybody started being nice to each other in a very, very constructive way. People were working together to find solutions. Niall's presentation included one small example. The government and the public sector delivery vehicles, High Speed 2 is one, there were many others, were looking for ways to pay the supply chain, even when work stopped. And everyone was being flexible on contract interpretation. So it was really inspiring to see. I didn't expect it, it just happened. In terms of support and guidance, bodies like the Construction Leadership Council, Build UK, giving very quick guidance on how to deliver construction projects safely with social distancing. In the main, construction pressed on. There was a certain aspect in central London where I think projects like Crossrail did a stop for a period of time, and that was mainly to protect the tube network and to enable key workers, NHS workers, to get to work safely. Okay? But in the main, we pressed on. There was tremendous support from government. The Cabinet Office issued their procurement practice note, which encouraged clients to interpret contracts flexibly, to find different ways of paying people, and maybe introduced reliefs into contracts to keep the supply chain alive. So a huge amount of support from government that played a huge part in that mutual trust and cooperation outbreak. Yeah, so what did we see contractually? So Standard NEC provisions were applied and were found very useful. Early warnings, risk reduction meetings, compensation events were notified, and the tools of the NEC contract were applied where they could really help. But there were certain instances where the standard NEC provisions were not applied, sort of deliberately so. You know, a lot of the major infrastructure programs in the UK are delivered using NEC contracts, often the cost reimbursable types and target types, which rely on the schedule of cost components to determine what gets paid as defined cost. And one of those features is the working areas principle. You know, you've got a payment for people whose normal place of work is in the working areas. Now, in a situation over a long period of time, like 2 years, where people are starting to work more remotely as a matter of necessity, you know, that rule doesn't really work. But the good thing is I saw clients and contractors carry on and operate pragmatic ways of making sure the job gets built, people get paid, and no one's losing out. So they were really flexible on that rule. And two major sort of pillars of NEC contracts in NEC 4, this is 10.1 and 10.2. Part is act as stated in the contract, and the part is act in a spirit of mutual trust and cooperation. So what I found was really interesting is, in this instance, 10.2 was implemented almost over priority to 10.1. And I'm going to give you some examples, okay, of how the parties overcame this very strong contract rule. It's a very important part of the contract to control how payments are determined in a cost reimbursable thing, is this working areas rule. So how did parties overcome that in a very quick and agile way? So here's I'll just put a few examples up on the screen. I'll let you just read them. It's quite big enough. So, you know, this is a project manager's instruction. I look to a prominent lawyer. Rob, do you think that's going to be effective in amending a yeah, so one really good example. So just a project manager's instruction saying basically the conditions of the contract are going to be interpreted differently. This is a major infrastructure project, example 2, done as a side letter. Very straightforward. You know, in hindsight, some of these things could, you know, this idea of the working area shall include the homes of individuals, you know, if mutual trust and cooperation wasn't being applied, you know, that could open up the client to pay for electricity, gas and things in the individual homes of the employees, but none of that took place. Another one done by a side letter. It says this letter does not alter the terms of the contract. But of course, the contract wasn't being strictly applied. The contract is being effectively modified by agreement on a mutual trust and cooperation basis. An example 4, another project manager's instruction. So listen, this is all very pragmatic, legally not watertight, but everybody wanted to make it work. And they did. Okay. So, one of the really interesting things about what happened during the pandemic was we learnt to work flexibly. Presenteeism was kind of put to one side, really, and construction industry has been very, very rigid around presenteeism. You know, it's very macho to be on site at 7:30 every day, and people, you know, scoff if you walk in at 8:30. So the industry has gone through a massive change. And what we're seeing now is that new entrants to the industry, graduates, people we're recruiting from school, are valuing flexible working higher than they're valuing salary. Okay? There's a real mix in the industry of how contractors and other businesses are continuing with the theme of flexible working. At one extreme, some contractors and businesses are operating a 3-line whip. You must be in the office. You must be on site. From Costain's point of view, we've embraced dynamic working in the sense that your working pattern can be determined on an individual by individual basis according to client needs, project needs, and your own needs. As long as they're all three met, you can work out an arrangement that works, okay? So there's quite a range, but what we are seeing is attrition rates for the businesses that are implementing a strict regime are much higher than the businesses that are operating a flexible regime. There's some challenges here because we've got, some job roles simply can't be done from home. Site supervision, extreme end of plant operator. But we do have to recognise flexible working is here to stay. There's well-being benefits. And what we're also seeing, there's reduction in cost. Sometimes for personal cost, for travel, sometimes for the project. Bringing the people in every day has a cost to it, and it's normally in an NEC cost reimbursable contract. That's part of the defined cost of delivering the job. You might even be able to have a reduced site establishment. So there is a real cost benefit as well as a well-being benefit, as well as it's valued by our employees. And reducing travel time, you might be able to get some more efficiency out of that as well. Sometimes we can now bring in expertise from different parts of the country or even different parts of the world onto a Teams call, and they're contributing to the project without any travel. It's quite powerful. And importantly, the technology exists. And I know contractors aren't, known for their cutting-edge use of IT at all times, but certainly from a Costain point of view, we got our Teams infrastructure in place about 6 months properly working before the pandemic broke, and that was a game changer. So Microsoft Teams, Zoom exists, and that is one of the reasons why we think flexible working is here to stay. So, but what do we do now? I think it worked during the pandemic, the trust and cooperation thing, people working from home. It worked partly because there was that spirit that we've got to get through this together, but also clients had already seen the project team in the main before they went working from home, so they were comfortable with the paying for the people they'd never met or they didn't understand what they were doing. But in the new world of new contracts being set up, how does the NEC contract adapt now to support flexible working where clients have never met some of the people that will be charged to their job? So this is one of the challenges. So we recognise, with my NEC board hat on, we've been talking about how to quickly introduce a change to the contract to support flexible working. What we've seen in the absence of that, clients are doing some quite clumsy things or some practical fixes, but we'd like to be able to come up with a solution. So I thought I'd just sort of outline the current thinking, and I'm happy to take feedback or ideas in the breaks and things. So the first point was that we don't think clients will want a carte blanche that the contractor can charge anyone into the job from any location. We don't think that's going to work. That will get Z-claused, okay? And it's quite right that client will want some controls. So the initial thinking is that there might be in a facility in the contract data for during the bid process the client to outline maybe job types or job roles that they would be happy for the contractor to fulfill working outside the working areas. And that would be sort of gives everybody a common basis for bidding. But what we also recognised is that the situation needs to be more agile than that, and that through the life of the job, that list of cheap people or job roles might change. And there might be a benefit to everybody to develop that list or to change it as the personnel and the team changes. So there will be a facility through the life of the job for the contractor to propose, or the client to propose, or the project manager to propose changes to that list of job roles or people that could be delivering, providing the work outside the working areas. And that would be done by strict agreement. There would be no sort of grounds for acceptance. It's got to be given so that the client can absolutely know it's gone too far or I'm not supportive without having to give any reason. So it's done by agreement. And that's the current sort of thinking on how to support flexible working going forwards. I'll be more than happy to receive some feedback on that. And then Glenn asked me, this is going to be one of my last slides. Glenn said, but you need to include a slide on, is there going to be a new compensation event clause needed? So I thought I'd better put that in there. As Glenn's the boss here today. So is there a new compensation event clause needed? So, looking at the provisions, so we're looking at two circumstances. It's a different pandemic, okay, that's fine. But if there's a resurrection of COVID in a different variant, let's say we get another lockdown, hope not, how does the contract respond? So looking at the existing provisions, secondary option X2, change in law, as I've explained, I think that had sort of limited real traction and relevance. Having looked at it, not everything's going to be dealt with as a change in law. You've got 60.119, an event which stops the contractor completing the whole of the works by the planned date for completion. Noting this clause contains some hurdles, I'll come back to that. You've also got the additional compensation event stated in contract data part 1. So clients, contractors can agree precise parameters for an additional compensation event that could be put in around COVID. And then there's the option for Z clauses. Now, coming back to the hurdles on 60.119, one of those is a test that an experienced contractor would have judged at the contract date this event to have such a small chance of occurring that it would have been unreasonable to have allowed for it. So we think probably if COVID arose again in the next 12 to 36 months, it's not got such a small chance of occurring that you wouldn't have been unreasonable to allow for it. But what would a contractor allow? So I think NEC and CLC produced a guidance note on this. And what they said is, look, in the event that we're still got COVID hanging around, rather than allow nothing, you could put a Z clause in that explains, exactly what has been assumed in terms of the duration of any further restrictions around coronavirus and the duration of that. And the Z clause could do a bit more, and I'm sure there'd be good lawyers who could help with this, could say, could go a little bit elaborate more about what happens if those durations are exceeded or how that compensation event might be assessed. Looking at all of these things, I think a new pandemic will be picked up probably by 60.119, maybe option X2, or you could put an additional compensation event in if you choose. Any further outbreak of COVID resulting in lockdown, well, you're either using the additional compensation events or you're going down this Z clause route. Sorry to end on a little bit of a contractual dry note, but happy to take any questions nonetheless. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew and Niall. Really interesting topics there. And I did ask Matthew to add this slide in. I'm seeing sort of first-hand experience of this. To me, it's really simple. It's 60.121, but obviously a client's got to be willing to put that in, as Matthew alluded to. I don't think COVID is such a small chance of occurring, it's unreasonable to have allowed for it, but what are we meant to have allowed for? 1 lockdown, 2 lockdowns, 3 lockdowns? So something along the lines of a clause that says at the point you sign the contract, current lockdown laws as they stand, which at the moment is next to nothing, that's what you signed up to, and if we go into further lockdown, that will be a compensation event. Clients, can I remind you, don't just say time and not cost. I'm seeing a lot of that as well. So there are clients out there with all heart saying, if we went into lockdown and you delay the project, we haven't got the heart to charge you delay damages, but we have got the heart to let you stomach all the cost, which I don't know how you meant to price for that as a contractor. So I'll be campaigning for that if you want to join my vote, but we'll see what clients do. Really interesting topics. We've only got time for a few questions, and we could pick up on a few afterwards, but I certainly don't want to let them off the hook. Any burning questions for Matthew or for Niall? Anyone raise your hand?
Currently in the UK, a number of these standard forms have provisions for change in law, but the change in law predominantly applies to the country itself where the project's taking place. Obviously with international supply chains, a change in law, for example, sanctions in the US could affect products can be obtained, etc. Have you done anything to change it on HS2?
On High Speed 2, certainly from the contracts I've seen, there's a specific coronavirus pandemic clause as part of the compensation rate.
Any questions for Niall on how to build a project in such a short space of time? There's one back there behind you as well, Chris. Sorry, go to Leslie first.
No, it seems to be mostly gazumping other people's questions today, so I'm going to take that as a win. This one's for
Just
Niall.
talking to the microphone. There you go.
This one's for Niall, and Matthew, chip in if you want to. I'm looking at the incredible results that were achieved with the Jupiter Labs. Amazing, well done, and thank you very much. What I'm also seeing is that was complex, in a complex environment in a very different way to HS2. And you responded to it with this keyword, agility, which I'm hearing quite a lot of. NEC is based on a predict and control paradigm of project management, and NEC is supposed to be a stimulus for good project management. I saw the use of option E. Is there any other provisions in there that you had in to support agile project management rather than the standard type? And Matthew, if you want to have a think about it, NEC, what's next? Do we need an NEC contract for agile?
Well, so I mean, in terms of provisions promoting agility, I can't think of anything specific other than the reduction in a lot of the timescales, and I think that was a fair reduction both on employer side, contractor side. I think at the heart of the agility was some cultural, softer things, and also very much, one thing I see far too often in the administration of NEC contracts is that you have standard kind of timelines for response, and people interpret that as, I must take 2 weeks to get back to you on the programme. There's absolutely nothing wrong with, getting something in and agreeing it very much that day and moving on. And also that there's, you have to be very wary of there will be changes, and the response to those changes, must be positive on both sides, and both parties. I will say at the beginning, we had to have a bit of a stand down, stop and reset, because people were forgetting it was an option E, and people were forgetting the end goal of the programme and falling into their usual commercial ways. So what worked very well there was to have a bit of a standstill, almost like a toolbox talk, and also to bring in the sponsor and bring in some of the senior executives to remind people of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and to really go after that tendency to fall back into normal behaviours.
Thanks, Niall. I needed that thinking time. I think there's a huge amount of flexibility in the NEC suite of contracts with the main options, the secondary options, the short contracts. It's difficult to imagine a situation where NEC couldn't flex to meet the desire for an agile, just talking through Niall's example, use of an option E. And, NEC promotes communication, risk management, decision making. I think it fits. I mean, unless you're talking about agile as in one of the agile project management comes with, the systems approach to infrastructure delivery, the V model. I don't know if that's, but if agile with a small a is, ability to make decisions quickly, to adapt, to change scope. I think NEC could support, but I'll be interested to know which aspects it could be fall short on.
It's got one very quick question in the middle, but we will have to break, I'm afraid. So thank you.
Okay, thanks. This one's for Niall. Thank you for your presentation on Project Jupiter. Very interesting. one of the key selling points for NEC Contracts is its ability to manage the time and cost of any development with predictability. So the acid test was, how did that work on this project?
Luckily, you've only got 30 seconds to answer.
Great question. I think, firstly, we had to recognise up front that we didn't have a fixed scope, fixed design, and we had a lot of uncertainty. So key to setting the project up in the right way was to establishing a sensible level of risk and contingency on both sides of the equation, and that had to recognise the position we were in, and then it was very much about being dynamic and having that good integration between time, scope, and change, and being able to manage that, forecast that, and deal with that. I think there was a genuine emphasis on schedule on this program, but HMT are very good at reminding you that it's public purse and promoting the need for value for money assessments. So it was a real challenge, and it needed a mature change, risk, and contingency approach.
Fantastic. Well, we need to bring an end to the morning segment.